Guys, it's Stephen here back with another video. How are you all doing today? Of course, it's the international break, so there's no Manchester City first team news going on today. So I thought I'd take a chance to ask a question which I'm asked all the time, basically, in comments on Twitter and all that kind of stuff. Who could be the next Phil Foden? Before I get into that, though, I want to say thank you to OneFootball, repping the OneFootball merch today, of course, for continuing to sponsor my channel and also continuing to be absolutely awesome. OneFootball is the home of football news. It is the app for football fans where you get all the news and all the updates from the world of football sent straight to your phone for absolutely £0. If you want to stay up to date with the Manchester City transfer news and get all the stats you need to win all your arguments with all your pals and all that kind of stuff, well, go and download OneFootball right now for free in the link in the description below to get up to date with all the Manchester City news, and it helps support my channel. You can see it on screen right next to me. It's awesome. What are you waiting for? Go and download it right now. But let's get on to this discussion point. And I'm kind of just winging it today because it's something I've thought about an awful lot. So I've got no notes in front of me. I'm just going off this little brain of mine. I'm going to chat openly to you with you guys about what I think in general about this question and what it implies and what it could potentially mean for our academy, and why we also have to, I guess, be realistic with our expectations. Now, immediately out the bat, like you guys, I want to see academy players in the first team. It's the most exciting thing possible for me as a football fan. Seeing someone like Phil Foden, who is a Manchester City fan as well, who understands what it feels like to watch your team win games, and he's been in the stands and watched us when he's growing up. Having someone out there who represents how we feel on the pitch, well, every goal feels sweeter. You try a little bit harder. You work harder. You want to win more. You want to succeed because you understand exactly how it feels as a fan. That stuff does give you an extra added bit of energy. It does give you a bit of bite and a bit of sharpness to your game that maybe some people wouldn't have. I'm not saying it's not possible to earn that love. Of course, we know the likes of Zabba and Vinny and Aguero and Silva and all that kind of stuff. They fell for this club, but there's no denying, in my personal opinion, that if you support a club, you care about it a little bit more by default, simply because why wouldn't you? That is human nature, and football is such a big important part of so many lives that it can't not have an effect. So I do want academy players in the first team. The one thing I do realise though is that it isn't easy. It isn't easy. The constant turmoil we've got is there's a very well, there's a struggle right at the heart of the question. Do we want to be really successful with the first team, or do we want to see academy players in it? And is it possible to find the middle ground? Are we already seeing the middle ground with Phil Foden, perhaps Eric Garcia as a backup player? Is that as good as it gets? Now, a lot of people would argue no, and it's probably reasonable too. But also, I do see the argument suggest, well, you can't really have your cake and eat it at the same time. You can't really have Manchester City with a squad full of world-class players, which we've got, and also expect to somehow find time for young players to get in the first team and be useful and play an awful lot of minutes to try and develop their own careers. Something's got to give at some point, and I understand that. And one thing I will say is that I do want this to happen, but I do also implicitly trust Guardiola. A lot of us a couple of years ago were moaning that Foden wasn't used anywhere near enough, and we felt that way. Maybe we were right, but what I will say is now Foden's 20 years old and an integral part of this team, and he's physically ready, and he looks hungrier than ever, and clearly his development hasn't stalled or slowed down in any shape or form. He's clearly a fantastic player, reveling in this newfound responsibility and going up a level at the moment. So maybe, just maybe, this man who knows an awful lot about football, Pep Guardiola, maybe he was right. I've got to add that caveat at the start because I think he does know a little bit more, and he's constantly having to juggle with expectation from the fans like us wanting to win trophies, while the fans also want to have those academy players there, while the owners want us to win the Champions League. He's constantly having to battle against that. So you've got to bear in mind, you can't keep everyone happy all the time. Having said that, I do think occasionally there may be chances where we could have used young players, but traditionally that's in cup competitions, and we also all love winning the Carabao Cup. So what can I say? Like, do we want to win these trophies, or do we want to use young players and risk going out a bit more? Which is definitely a situation that you've got to consider. Now, I'm not saying it isn't possible to find more of a balance, but Guardiola is successful for a reason. He knows how to manage people. He knows how to manage young stars. He knows how to manage a squad full of world-class players as well. He has to keep them all happy. Now, a lot of people will go, and I've said this before myself, so I'm calling myself a hypocrite here, but I've realised this season the strength of our squad and why it's so important. A lot of people will go, yeah, but can't he just tell, I don't know, player X, a misperforming player, tell them to sit in the stands this week while we give, I don't know, for example, let's take Cole Palmer as an example. When we were playing poorly at the start of the season, Cole Palmer A highly talented young winger that a lot of people, he's also a midfielder as well, but most effective potentially as a winger. A lot of people were saying, can he get into the first team? He should be involved in the first team, which would of course meant that we would have to have dropped a winger in a full strength squad potentially. So how would you tell Sterling or Ferran Torres, who's just signed for £20 million, the Spanish international, or how would you tell Riyad Mahrez that actually they are going to sit in the stands this week? Especially if they're not doing anything wrong. That's one thing for you to consider. You can drop a player from the first team if they're not playing well, but dropping them from the squad entirely if it's simply a case of they're not playing well but still training hard, well, that's going to ruffle up some egos. You don't drop a player from a whole squad just because they're not playing well. You only drop them from the squad if they're not training hard and they're not working and they're being arrogant or they're being a bit of a knob. You don't drop a player from a squad simply because they're out of form, because that happens. That is human nature. And that is constantly the balance that we need to remember every single time we ask for a young player to go on the bench instead of a senior player. He's not going to do it simply because you don't want to upset a £50 million player, because they have friends within the squad. They have friends within the coaching team. They have friends in the press. And before you know it, you got dissent or you've got unhappiness. And all it takes is one player to moan to his mate and then go, it's been a bit harsh there. You've worked really hard. Okay, you may be out of form, but dropping you for an 18-year-old from the squad entirely, well, that's going to ruffle some feathers. So basically, all this caveat, the reason I'm bringing all this up is because you've got to realise how hard it is for young players to get into this first team. Not because they're not good enough, but just because this squad is so dense and so successful that it almost demands to be used to its fullest extent. And you have to use these players. You can't turn around and not give the likes of Ake, Ferran Torres, and even Aguero currently can't get a minute. So how can we find time for Liam Delap? That's the point I'm making. Now, having said that, I do feel it would be a shame not to find a space potentially for one or two of these young players, and I'm going to get onto the young players in a second from now. I just want to build that kind of preamble caveat simply because I feel like it's a very important talking point to outline. This is like a one-man podcast basically. Outline the full extent of why it's such a hard task. I really feel like it goes without saying that we'd all love to see academy players there, but we have to understand the consequences of telling this player is not involved to play this player instead, especially when it's a raw teenager and an established international footballer. It doesn't send good messages, especially if they don't deserve it. We constantly conflate the idea of a player not playing well as therefore not trying, which is rarely true. I tell you what, every single player in this Manchester City squad, they will be ultimate professionals, even if they're not always at their best form. I guarantee you they're at where they are in the game because they work hard, they train hard, and they look after themselves. There'll be the odd notable exception occasionally, of course they will, but that is still a rarity, and usually these players are where they are and they signed for Manchester City because they're not dickheads. We have to bear that in mind. So you can't just drop them for not playing well. You can drop them from the team, but not from the bench, because that is going to cause trouble potentially. You could turn around and go, so what? But at the same time, that's not how the real world operates. You can't ask that. You have to be reasonable. You have to see the bigger picture. You have to understand that he's managing a bunch of egos from a bunch of players that believe they are God's gift to this world, because that's what footballers tend to believe. So there is the preamble. In terms of players, so that was 6-7 minutes of caveats, but I feel setting the floor level, setting the foundations of this discussion are important, simply because I believe the idea of the next Phil Foden is a complicated question. Who is the next Phil Foden isn't as simple as who's the best young talent. It's who could be the luckiest, who could maybe find the time if one of these first team players isn't there, who could have the foresight to actually hang around and be there for a certain period of time, and who just gets a little bit of luck, man. That's what you have to be the next Phil Foden. You have to be lucky, because Phil Foden exists, and Phil Foden's very existence is also a reason why someone like Cole Palmer might not get a chance, because Phil Foden has taken that young player squad, and we want Grealish, and we want Messi, and we want Haaland, but all this means is young player gets pushed down, and then we go, why is the young player game played? It's because we just signed Ferran Torres and Ake and potentially Haaland. It's all a cyclical nature. In terms of young players, I do honestly believe there are young players that are more than good enough to play for Manchester City. I feel like currently we're sat on a crop of talent that has more than enough potential to be very useful for this first team. I actually sometimes watch the EDS play. I can't watch the under-18s very often, unfortunately, because the under-18s games aren't shown anymore, and due to lockdown, you can't go and watch them in person, which is one of the biggest shames of lockdown for me. In general, I loved in August every year going and watching under-18s, checking out the new generation and watching the first year scholars and going, that kid's got talent, he could be really good. But I've not seen any of the likes of Borges or people like Smith or Taz Shoddy, because I've not been able to see the Shoddy because we can't watch them, unfortunately. Either way, so basically what we've got here is a bunch of young players that in the EDS, in my opinion, are often just too good for the level they're playing at. Genuinely too good. They're breaking records, goal-scoring records in the under-23s league. Delap has broken the goal-scoring record as a striker. They walk through games often. Of course, Chelsea the other day gave them a tough time, but Chelsea are probably the only other club that can do that at the moment. But other than that, this City under-23 side is mainly full of 17, 18-year-olds, and they batter everyone frequently, and they don't really get out of second gear. It is frightening how much potential they have. There's no guarantee they'll make it because, once again, circumstance, personal motivation, a little bit of luck, injuries, stuff behind the scenes, all these factors, and maybe just no chance because of a full squad. All these factors can play into it, but this is a very talented group. The standout names for me are someone like Liam Delap. Liam Delap, we all know a little bit about. Delap, now, many people thought should have got more chances, and I probably agree with that. I would say Delap maybe should have got more chances. The one thing I will say about Liam Delap is I feel like he played himself a little bit by his own over-eagerness. One thing we've all learned from Guardiola is this is a man who values control and shape and structure more than anything else. Liam Delap is, unfortunately, a bit of a hothead. He's been sent off twice this season for aggressive behaviour in the academy sides, and that kind of stuff. He comes across as uncontrollable, and I remember him getting a relatively reckless yellow card when he came on versus Leicester. He did it right and he hit the crossbar, I think, that day. But I do think Guardiola looked at someone like Liam Delap and saw a loose cannon and someone that he couldn't control. Now, that probably isn't fair, because I'm sure he would have been fine and learned. I guess the point I'm making is Guardiola is very hesitant. Look how long it took him to trust Phil Foden. I also remember him losing trust when Fabian Delph got him sent off he got himself sent off in an FA Cup game, I think it was. Was it Wigan? I don't know, someone like that. He got himself sent off. And Guardiola never looked at him the same again then. And Guardiola can change on a player if he doesn't feel like you can trust him. And my worry about Delap is that Guardiola felt he was a little bit too raw. And that's not to say he's written him off forever. It's just at that moment he probably felt Delap needed a little bit of time to go away and grow up a little bit and learn how to be trustworthy. Works hard, incredible attitude in terms of work and willingness to win games. But I do feel, if it's fair or not, I'm not saying it's fair, but I do feel that is the reason why Delap has been away from the first team. Simply because Guardiola looked at him and gone, loads of talent, but he's too rash. That would be my guess, because Guardiola is a control freak of the highest degree, and that's what makes him so successful. But I would not be surprised if that also is the reason why he looks at a raw 17-year-old and goes, you need to grow up a little bit, pal. I bet he's not even said that to him, by the way, but that would be my gut instinct. Either way, Delap has all the ability to make it at the highest level. He's a natural goal scorer, a varied goal scorer, fast, strong, powerful. I'm almost certain Delap needs to go away for a loan or two, and that's not because he's not good enough, just because I feel like a loan or two, at any standard, as long as it's championship above, I don't know, as long as it's a top European league or a championship above, I'm fine with that. And I don't think he'll go anywhere other than the championship, personally. I think the championship's probably fine for him because it's physical and he'll learn there. And I think he'll take a slower route to Manchester City's first team, but I do think he has the ability to get there. And I do think Manchester City will be tempted to see how he develops because he's a natural finisher. Elsewhere, away from Liam Delap, Cole Palmer to me is a special talent. He's the kind of player that makes football look easy. He reminds me a little bit stylistically of Nasri in terms of the way he has immense technical ability and he can glide past people, and of course a little bit like another French footballer, Robert Perez, another ex-Arsenal player, of course. Perez has that same nonchalant glide, and that I guess the thing that reminded me most of Perez when Perez did that chip, and then we saw Cole Palmer do it in the under 18s as well, or the under 23. Sorry, Palmer has magic in his boots, and a little bit like Mahrez actually. But the one thing I will say about him, he works a little bit harder than Mahrez does, with all due respect to Mahrez. And he even captained the under-18s at one point. So that is a leader's ability there. Cole Palmer is a goal scorer. He's incredibly technical and has all the ability to make it in Manchester City. Will he? I don't know, but he probably needs a loan next season. Tommy Doyle is the one we all know. Now, Tommy Doyle is a lot better technically than most people realise. He's so good at set pieces. He can play delightful little through balls. The amount of assists he's got from the 23s, playing through balls to Delap and Palmer. He's so talented. And he seems the natural for me, not for the number 6 role, but more in that number 8 role. He seems very, very good. A little KDB at times, genuinely. And I do feel like someone like Tommy Doyle, who once again has the thickest of blue blood coursing through his veins because of his ex-Man City players. He cares about this club deeply, and he's a leader, naturally a captain. Tommy Doyle, for me, is one that should be around the first team for a while. And I wish there was a way for him to get more experience and be around the first team without having to rely on first team games. I know that doesn't make any sense, but I wish there was maybe a more competitive reserve league, because Doyle, I feel like, could have a career like... I don't know, someone like, he's better technically than Henderson in my opinion, and he works just as hard. Why can't he have a slow way to the top? He's not going to be like a Phil Foden, a special player who'll go straight to the top like that. He could be one of those guys who gets very good and then gets better and better and better. Look at people like... I don't know, someone like Darren Fletcher at United. Once again, I think he's probably more technically gifted than Fletcher was at this age. But Fletcher got better and better before he became a big pivotal part of that Man United side that was so successful. These players sometimes take a slower route to the top, but they get there eventually. And Tommy Doyle has all that ability. Find a way to make him useful potentially, but he could be one for a loan next season. But he could do it in time. Elsewhere, there's so many talented footballers. James McAtee is possibly the most closest that I've seen to David Silva in a Manchester City shirt. In the academy sides. A lot of people said it was Foden, but Foden always genuinely reminded more of Iniesta in terms of his dribbling ability. But McAtee has that pauser, that often used phrase that we associate with players who can speed it up but also slow it down, put the foot on the ball, see the bigger picture and dictate play. James McAtee is a special talent. He's got magic in his boots, he can score goals, and he understands the rhythm and the tempo of football. I would not be surprised if he's an outside bet to be very useful and close to the first team. He's one that maybe could stay another year, maybe get another season of under-23s football, and maybe find his way into the Carabao Cup games. But McAtee is a gifted young attacking midfielder with grace, a wonderful left foot, and mesmeric footwork. He's a very good player, and once again, another works very hard. McAtee has a big chance, and he's been here at Manchester City for an awful long time. Elsewhere, we signed a kid called Romeo Lavia. He's now 17 years old. We got him from Anderlecht in the summer, and this kid is special. He plays in the number 6 role, and his technique is already far too good for this level. Even when he was playing pros in the Czech Trophy, he was still too good. You couldn't get the ball off him. He also is excellent at breaking the lines. He's the real deal, this kid, and he could be one genuinely that is useful around the first team by the time he's 18, 19 years old. Lavia is a special talent, a genuinely special talent. Hopefully he could be one that could potentially become a long-term backup, or maybe another option, never mind a backup, to Rodri in the future. It's small, definitely, but his understanding on the ball, honestly, he looks like he's come from La Masia. So much technique. Footwork is absolutely immense. A battling number 6 who's just so calm on the ball. So Guardiola. It's unbelievable. Elsewhere, you've got a whole bunch of attacking players with loads of skill. Adozi's a really lightning quick winger with loads of skill. And then, of course, you've got Luke Mbete, who's a really, really, really good centre-half. Left-footed as well, powerful. The way he moves on the ball, his gait, his strength. He reminds me a little bit of a young Vincent Kompany. Only young once again, loads of talent. But once again, I guess the question mark is how difficult is it to get into this first team with the centre-back options we've got? We've currently got the likes of Nathan Ake, Laporte. We've got obviously Stones and Diaz, and then we've got Taylor Howard-Bellis currently doing very well on loan at Blackburn. How does he get ahead of Howard-Bellis? Never mind all those 4 senior players. Once again, it comes down to circumstance and opportunity, and hopefully he will find that. But it's so difficult for him and people like him to get a chance when it's that packed ahead of him. It really is that packed. I mean, even the likes of Ben Knight is a very good player, but I feel like he's dropped down a little bit in terms of the chances. Bernabe, of course, now plays as a left back for the EDS. Maybe there's a chance there for Bernabe as attacking left back. He seems to have taken to that role really well, though the question mark about Bernabe, he has that desire and tenacity to get forward and overlap and be very useful with his left foot, but he's slight, he's small, and he's never going to be good at the back post. He could have the same defensive problems as Angelino did, but he is an interesting bet at left back, but I feel like as good as he is, he's another one that could probably end up leaving pretty soon and maybe find a career somewhere else, like maybe someone like Ben Knight. Not because they're not good enough, just because it's very difficult. Once again, Felix Lemaitre, probably too difficult for him. So much natural talent, but I do believe the likes of Cole Palmer may already be ahead of them despite being a couple of years younger. That's not to say Lemaitre isn't brilliant. He is a very naturally gifted footballer, but sometimes I feel like Lemaitre lacks a little bit of edge to his game. That's the only way I can describe it. He seems to be a little bit too laconic, a little bit too laid back, but that doesn't mean he isn't brilliant technically. And of course, once again, he's a good lad, cares about his club deeply, like his brother did. But it may be a step too far. Once again as well, the other centre-backs currently playing, the likes of Callum Doyle, not related to Tommy Doyle, a very composed centre-back, and Finley Burns alongside him. They look a little bit like Stones and Diaz when they're playing alongside together, or Laporte and Diaz, sorry. Very good footballers, but once again, how easy is it for them to get through to the first team at the moment? It probably isn't. And we haven't even got on then to the likes of Jaden Braff, who's currently on loan. I feel personally, for me, the pathway for Braff may be just too difficult now. It may be too difficult. He's gone on loan to Udinese, but he barely plays. He doesn't really get a touch, unfortunately. He's been off the bench once, I think, in a mid-table, struggling-ish Udinese side. And given the fact that there were reports that he burned bridges at Manchester City, I can unfortunately see that pathway closed for Jaden Braff. That's not because he's not good enough, simply because sometimes that's just how the cookie crumbles. And I do feel like that's probably a step too far now. I feel like we'll sell him to the Bundesliga in the summer, something like that. Maybe they fancy him over at Dortmund as a make-weight for Mr. Haaland. That would be interesting, wouldn't it? And he's loads of players as well. Lewis Fiorini is currently on loan at NEC Breda. He's a young Manchester City fan, doing really, really, really well. I really like him, honestly. He's a cracking little player, scoring goals as well, being absolutely influential. Big Man City fan. He's obviously on loan. It's going to be hard for him to get into the first team, but you never know. He could come back and be one of those late developers where by the time he's 20, he's scoring goals and being absolutely excellent. Technically a fantastic footballer, and he's had a season of senior football now. So who knows? He could be ahead. But either way, it's very, very, very difficult, It's this team... This team is so hard to break into, even for senior established international players. How would you do it? How would you do it as an academy player? I'm looking at the EDS squad right now just to make sure I've not missed anyone, and I probably have. Alpha Dionko is one I've missed, a powerful right back with loads of ability going forward. But once again, how do you get in ahead of Cancelo and Kyle Walker? It might just be a step too far. Alex Robertson is a player I really like, by the way, a young, gifted... box-to-box midfielder, an excellent finisher, a genuinely fantastic finisher, Alex Robinson, loads of skill. He's probably one who's going to start every game next season for the EDS because he's only a little bit younger, so he won't play much. And likewise, Oscar Bob, I presume, will play an awful lot of season. Oscar Bob is a Norwegian, gifted, right-sided kind of attacking midfielder. He likes to play as a central midfielder. He's left-footed, but he often plays out in the wing, and he's so skillful once again. But it's so difficult for him to get into the team, potentially. And likewise, Claudio Gomez, man. He's obviously had a really weird route, but I would suspect he will leave, unfortunately, because he's been playing centre-back, weirdly, a bit at right-back, but he's behind Romeo Lavia already in his preferred position as a number 6, so I suspect Claudio Gomez will probably move on, unfortunately. And then there's Morgan Rogers as well, who's on loan at the moment. Where's he on loan to? I always forget. He's currently on loan at, I forgot, is it Leighton or Lincoln? I always get the two mixed up. Let me just double check. Either way, his loan is going very, very well at the moment. He's scoring some wonder goals for them, and he's currently he's starring basically. He's only 18 years old, and he's impressing people so much over there with his natural ability. For him, is one where hopefully he gets maybe Championship football next season because he definitely has a quality. He definitely does. It's Lincoln, by the way. I always get those mixed up. It's Lincoln City's that, but he scored 6 goals in 16 games so far in League One for them. Maybe next season a Championship low will be good for him. But guys, I've been through all those players there, and I guess the point I'm making is so many have the talent. If you pushed me to say some names, I would potentially turn around and say maybe the likes of Romeo Lavia, Doyle, Palmer, McAtee, Delap, maybe some of them, maybe Mbete at some point. But it ain't going to be easy. It isn't going to be easy for all the caveats that I've added. Manchester City have an incredibly good youth team, but we're going to have to find solutions for these players because the downside of having a squad as good as it is and as great as it is watching us win all these trophies is unfortunately something we'll have to give if we want to see more Phil Fodens. Maybe, just maybe, we don't replace in the long term the likes of Gundogan or Fernandinho and we look towards the academy. Maybe we do that. Maybe we look towards the academy when Gabriel Jesus inevitably gets upset and Haaland's ahead of him maybe, and then we use someone like Liam Delap. Who knows? Or it could be that one of Laporte and Ake or Diaz and Stone, well, Diaz will be fine, I'm sure. One of the other three doesn't get enough football at some point, and we look at Harwood Bellis and go, he's ready to be number 4. Maybe that's the option there. But life as Manchester City academy player, it's very good. It's good fun, but it isn't easy to get into this team, and we have to have patience. Unfortunately, you can't always get everything. You can't be one of the best teams in the world with one of the best squads in the world and also get 5 young local players through. It's just not really possible anymore, unfortunately. Maybe it is over time, slowly, but it requires luck. It requires an acceptance that we can't really complain too much about what Guardiola's doing, because Guardiola knows how to win, and it'd be very arrogant of me to sit here and tell Guardiola he's getting it wrong, given the fact that we're on for a quadruple potentially. He knows what he's doing, Guardiola, so we have to be patient. We have to accept that these young players, as good as they are, if they don't get in the first team, it's not because they're not good enough. It just means the task maybe was just too big for them, and they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. But either way, they will have a very good career. I've got no doubt about it. Some of these players are going to the very top of the game. Hopefully it's with Manchester City. Guys, that was just 25 minutes of me talking on my own about the academy. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. It was like a one-man podcast, me getting all my thoughts off my chest about the Manchester City academy players and who could be the next Phil Foden. I didn't really answer the question, while I did at the same time. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Big love to everyone who helps support the channel on Patreon, patreon.com/Esteemed Company, if you want to help support me a little bit as this channel grows and grows. Thank you to my Patreon producer Ahmed Al-Ali, absolute legend, and all the names scrolling down the side of the screen. And tomorrow I got something very special coming up, very, very special, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the video. Let me know if you enjoyed this, and go and check out the long podcast I did with Asan from the 9320 pod, where I talked about all the transfer rumours. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know down in the comments if you did. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know your thoughts on the subject. See you later.